The evening air was calm, and the soft glow of sunset filtered through the windows of my home. I had just settled into my favorite armchair with a warm mug of chamomile tea when my phone buzzed with another social media notification. At 66 years old, I wasn't someone who spent hours scrolling online, but I enjoyed checking in on family every now and then. That night, however, one simple post changed everything. My name is Evelyn Carter, and I had lived in my duplex for over 3 decades. Every brick of that house carried a memory. My late husband Daniel and I had worked overtime for years to pay it off. After he passed away 12 years earlier, I stayed in the downstairs apartment while my only son Nathan and his wife Claire moved into the upstairs unit shortly after their wedding. At first it felt perfect. I imagined Sunday dinners, holiday celebrations, and hearing my future grandchildren laugh in the backyard. Instead, those dreams slowly faded as Claire began treating me less like family and more like an aging neighbor who happened to own the property. It didn't happen overnight. First came the small things. Conversations ended whenever I entered the room. Invitations became fewer each year. Holidays were suddenly split between Claire's relatives while I was told everyone was keeping things simple. Still, I stayed quiet. I convinced myself they were busy building their lives. I paid the property taxes. I covered the water bill. The heating, electricity, landscaping, internet, and even several unexpected repairs all came from my retirement savings. Whenever Nathan thanked me, he'd promise it was only temporary. "It'll only be another few months, Mom." Those few months quietly turned into 5 years. That Friday evening marked Nathan and Claire's 6th wedding anniversary. 3 days before, Claire had casually mentioned they were going out for dinner. "It's a very small reservation," she'd explained, while checking her phone instead of looking at me. "Only immediate family." I smiled politely. "Of course. Have a wonderful evening." The words hurt more than I admitted, but I wasn't about to beg for an invitation. Once they left, the house became wonderfully quiet. I made tea, wrapped myself in a blanket, and started reading a mystery novel. An hour later, curiosity got the better of me, and I opened social media. The very first picture stopped me cold. Claire stood beside Nathan, smiling brightly beneath the sparkling lights of the city's finest restaurant. Around them sat her parents, both sisters, her brother, 2 cousins, and even her aunt and uncle. Wine glasses were raised. Everyone looked joyful. The caption beneath the picture read, "Nothing compares to celebrating with family. Grateful for every moment together." For several long seconds, I simply stared. I wasn't angry. I wasn't even surprised. Instead, a strange calm settled over me. 5 years of paying nearly every expense for 2 households. 5 years of cooking holiday meals. 5 years of watching their dog whenever they traveled. 5 years of helping without ever asking for anything in return. Apparently, none of that qualified me as family. I gently pressed the like button. Then I typed one sentence. "Since only family shares responsibilities, I'll let the family begin paying all the household expenses from now on." I hit post. Then I placed my phone face down on the coffee table. Exactly 4 minutes later, it began vibrating nonstop. Nathan called. Claire called. Nathan again. Claire again. Text messages poured in one after another. "Mom, please answer. Delete your comment immediately. Everyone can see this." I ignored every notification. Instead, I walked into my study and opened a filing cabinet. Inside was a neatly organized folder I'd quietly prepared over the past month. Copies of utility bills, property tax receipts, insurance payments, maintenance invoices, bank statements. Every dollar I'd spent supporting them was documented. Deep down, I suppose I'd been preparing for this conversation long before that photograph appeared online. Heavy footsteps echoed down the staircase above. A loud knock rattled my front door. I took my time before opening it. Nathan stood outside, breathing hard, still wearing the expensive suit he'd worn to dinner. His face was flushed with embarrassment. "Mom," he said anxiously, "what were you thinking? Claire is devastated. Her entire family saw your comment." I folded my hands calmly. "I know. You need to delete it." "No." He blinked. "What do you mean, no?" "I mean exactly that." His shoulders sagged. "You ruined our anniversary." I looked directly into his eyes. "No, Nathan." I spoke softly enough that he had to listen carefully. "You enjoyed your anniversary exactly the way you wanted." I stepped aside and placed the thick folder on the hallway table. "I'm simply adjusting my finances to match my place in your lives." Nathan frowned. "What does that even mean?" I opened the folder and slid the first document toward him. "The automatic payments for your utilities end on the 1st of next month." His eyes widened. You can't be serious." "I've never been more serious." Before he could respond, another car door slammed outside. Fast, angry footsteps marched toward the porch. Claire. Judging by the determined look on her face, the conversation was only beginning. Claire reached the front porch within seconds, her heels striking the wooden steps with enough force to announce her anger before she spoke a single word. She stopped beside Nathan, crossed her arms, and glared at me. "I hope you're happy," she snapped. "You embarrassed us in front of everyone." I met her gaze without raising my voice. "I didn't embarrass anyone, Claire. I simply told the truth." Her expression tightened. "That comment made it look like we're taking advantage of you." I tilted my head slightly. "Aren't you?" For a brief moment, neither of them answered. Nathan rubbed the back of his neck, clearly wishing he were somewhere else. Claire recovered first. "This is emotional blackmail." "No," I replied evenly. "It's financial responsibility." I picked up the folder from the hallway table and handed Nathan several documents. "The electricity account for the upstairs apartment has already been transferred into your names. The water service will be switched next week, and the heating bill after that. I've canceled every automatic payment connected to your apartment." Nathan stared at the papers. "You already arranged all this?" "I did." "When?" "Several weeks ago." Claire looked stunned. "You planned this?" "I planned to stop being taken for granted." Silence settled between us. For years I had believed kindness meant saying yes. Somewhere along the way I realized kindness without respect eventually becomes exploitation. Nathan finally looked up. "We weren't trying to hurt you." "Maybe not intentionally," I answered, "but intentions don't erase actions." Claire folded her arms tighter. "So this is all because of one anniversary dinner?" I shook my head. "No. The dinner was simply the moment I finally stopped making excuses." Her face reddened. "You've always been overly sensitive." I smiled sadly. "No, Claire, I've simply been overly patient." Without another word, I wished them both a good night and gently closed the door. The next morning, I woke feeling lighter than I had in years. Usually, Saturdays were spent shopping for enough groceries to fill both refrigerators in the house. I never complained about it. Buying extra food for Nathan had become second nature, and Claire happily helped herself to everything I purchased. This time, I made a different list. Fresh salmon, a loaf of artisan bread, seasonal vegetables, coffee beans, fruit. Exactly enough for one person, nothing more. As I pushed my cart through the grocery store, I realized something surprising. I wasn't angry. I was relieved. When I returned home, I stocked my refrigerator and quietly unplugged the extra refrigerator in the basement that had always served as the family's shared pantry. By early evening, someone pounded on my front door. Claire. She didn't bother greeting me. "Where's all the food?" I put away my groceries. "No, I mean the basement refrigerator." "I emptied it." She stared in disbelief. "What are we supposed to eat?" I couldn't help noticing how naturally she expected me to solve the problem. "I imagine whatever you choose to buy." We didn't plan for this. I didn't plan on being excluded from my own family either. She opened her mouth, searching for another argument, but none came. Finally, she turned sharply and stormed upstairs. Only minutes later, raised voices echoed through the ceiling. Nathan and Claire were arguing, really arguing, not the usual quiet disagreements. This was louder, more desperate. For years, I had unknowingly protected their marriage from reality. Whenever money became tight, I quietly covered another expense. Whenever groceries ran low, I restocked them. Whenever something broke, I paid to fix it. They had mistaken my generosity for permanence. Now they were discovering what adulthood actually cost. Monday morning marked another change. The backyard had once been my favorite place. Years earlier, Daniel had planted a flowering maple tree in the corner, saying one day we'd sit beneath it together after retirement. After his passing, I spent countless evenings there reading books. Then Claire gradually transformed the space. Large outdoor furniture appeared, a fire pit, decorative lights, a massive grill. Soon she was hosting weekend gatherings while I remained inside my own home, feeling like an uninvited guest. That chapter ended on Monday. I hired 2 college students who did landscaping during the summer. Together, we carefully carried every piece of Claire's patio furniture upstairs onto the spacious balcony attached to her apartment. Nothing was damaged. Everything remained perfectly usable. It simply occupied the space that actually belonged to her unit. Afterward, I visited a local garden center. I purchased 2 elegant wooden chairs, a matching table, and several flower planters filled with bright lavender and white daisies. By lunchtime, my backyard looked peaceful again. I sat beneath Daniel's maple tree with a glass of iced tea and my favorite novel. When Claire returned home from work, she stopped so suddenly that I heard her keys hit the driveway. "My furniture!" she shouted. "It's on your balcony," I answered pleasantly. "But we've always used the backyard," I smiled. "And now I will." She stared at me in disbelief. "You've changed." I looked around the quiet garden that finally felt like home again. "No," I said gently. "I've finally remembered that this is my home too." The peaceful atmosphere in the backyard lasted exactly 1 day. By Tuesday morning, the upstairs apartment had become unusually quiet. No television, no music, no cheerful conversations. Instead, I occasionally heard muffled voices drifting through the ceiling, followed by long stretches of silence. It wasn't difficult to guess what they were discussing. For the first time since moving into my duplex, Nathan and Claire were paying attention to every dollar leaving their bank account. Late that afternoon, a utility company technician arrived to complete the final meter inspection. Everything had already been approved, and the visit was simply to verify that each apartment was now billed separately. As I led him toward the basement, the upstairs door burst open. Claire hurried down the stairs. "What is he doing here?" she demanded. "The final inspection," I answered calmly. "He can't just come into the house." "He certainly can. I scheduled the appointment." She looked from me to the technician before lowering her voice. "We haven't even had time to prepare." The technician politely continued his work while I folded my arms. "You've had 5 years to prepare." Her eyes flashed with frustration. "You know that's not what I meant." "I know exactly what you meant." Within 20 minutes, the inspection was complete. The technician handed me the paperwork, wished us both a pleasant afternoon, and drove away. Claire remained standing in the driveway. "This is unbelievable." "No," I replied softly. "This is overdue." She shook her head before walking back upstairs, slamming the door behind her hard enough to rattle the windows. A few days later, another issue surfaced. For years, the laundry room in the basement had functioned as if it belonged entirely to Nathan and Claire. Claire often left wet clothes sitting inside the washer for hours, sometimes days. She'd text me from work asking if I could move her laundry into the dryer because she was busy. More than once, I'd folded their clothes simply because I needed to use the machine myself. I never complained, until now. On Thursday morning, I carried a small lock from the hardware store downstairs. The washer and dryer were expensive appliances Daniel and I had purchased shortly before he became ill. They still worked perfectly, but after years of constant use, they deserved better care. The lock fit neatly over the electrical plug. Simple, effective, mine. That evening, I heard hurried footsteps racing down the basement stairs. A few seconds later came Nathan's voice. "Mom?" I stepped into the hallway. He looked embarrassed. "Did you lock the washer?" "Yes." Claire appeared behind him, already upset. "My work clothes are inside." "I'm aware." She threw her hands into the air. "So what are we supposed to do?" "There are 2 laundromats less than 10 minutes away." She stared at me as though I'd suggested something impossible. "You expect us to pay for laundry?" I raised an eyebrow. "I've been paying for yours for years." Nathan sighed deeply. "We can't afford to keep spending money like this." I looked at him with genuine sympathy. "Then perhaps now is the time to create a household budget." Claire laughed bitterly. "This is revenge." "It isn't. What else would you call it?" "I call it ownership." I rested one hand on the basement railing. "Those machines belong to me. You're welcome to purchase your own if you'd like the convenience." Neither of them spoke. Eventually they left, carrying a basket full of dirty clothes to the car. As they drove away, I realized something unexpected. For years, I had dreaded conflict. Now that it had finally arrived, it no longer frightened me. Sunday had always been my busiest day. Every week, I prepared a large family meal. Roast chicken, homemade pasta, fresh bread, desserts made from Daniel's old recipes. Sometimes Claire invited her parents without asking. Sometimes neighbors joined us. Everyone complimented the food. Few noticed who had spent 6 hours preparing it. This Sunday would be different. Instead of tying on my apron, I chose my favorite navy blue dress. I booked a table at a lakeside restaurant nearly 40 minutes away. For the first time in years, I spent the afternoon enjoying a leisurely lunch, reading a novel between courses, and walking along the shoreline beneath the warm summer sun. The peace was priceless. When I returned home shortly before 5 o'clock, Nathan was sitting alone on the front steps. He stood as soon as he saw me. "Mom, where have you been?" "Out." He looked exhausted. "We thought you were cooking." "I never said I was." "Claire invited her parents." I smiled politely. "Then I'm sure they enjoyed seeing each other." His shoulders slumped. "We had to order takeout. I'm glad everyone still had dinner." He hesitated before speaking again. "You've changed so much." I looked toward the backyard where sunlight filtered through Daniel's maple tree. "No, Nathan." My voice remained calm. "I spent years changing myself to make life easier for everyone else." I turned back to face him. "I'm simply becoming the woman I used to be." Nathan lowered his eyes. For the first time in years, he had no argument, only silence. And sometimes, silence says far more than words ever could. The conversation on the front porch lingered in my mind long after Nathan returned upstairs. I could hear faint voices through the ceiling late into the evening. Their discussion wasn't loud this time. It sounded tired, almost defeated. Reality had a way of replacing anger with worry. Over the next week, I noticed small changes. Delivery meals became less frequent. The expensive coffee cups Claire carried every morning disappeared. The shiny new packages that used to arrive almost daily were nowhere to be seen. For the first time since they had moved in, they were living within the limits of their own income. I didn't celebrate their struggle. I simply accepted that adulthood often arrives later for some people than others. A few evenings later, there was another knock at my door. This time, Nathan stood alone. His shoulders drooped, and the confidence he once carried had vanished. "Can I come in?" he asked quietly. "Of course." I poured 2 cups of tea, and we sat across from one another at my dining table. For several minutes, neither of us spoke. Finally, Nathan slid a folder across the table. Inside were apartment listings, monthly budgets, and pages filled with handwritten calculations. "I didn't realize how much everything costs," he admitted. I looked at the papers without saying anything. He rubbed his forehead. "Rent around here is unbelievable. Add groceries, utilities, insurance, and gas." He sighed. "We're barely saving anything." I nodded gently. "Running a household has never been inexpensive." He looked up. "I guess I never noticed because you always handled it." His words carried no excuses, only regret. "I'm sorry, Mom." The apology sounded sincere, but I knew one conversation couldn't erase years of being overlooked. "I appreciate hearing that," I replied. He hesitated. "Is there any way we can go back to how things were?" I smiled sadly. "No." His expression fell. "I don't mean that unkindly," I continued, "but going back would mean pretending none of this happened. It would mean teaching both of us that disrespect has no consequences." Nathan stared quietly into his tea. "So, what happens now?" I reached into a drawer and removed a neatly prepared document, a lease agreement. He looked surprised. "If you and Claire want to continue living upstairs, you'll pay rent beginning next month. Not an unreasonable amount, just fair market value, slightly below what other tenants would pay." He slowly flipped through the pages. "You've already prepared this?" "I've had plenty of time to think." He swallowed hard. "Claire isn't going to like this." I suspected as much. He gave a tired laugh. "She keeps saying that one day the house will belong to me anyway." I leaned forward. "Perhaps someday it will." Then I met his eyes. "But today it belongs to me." "I know. I'm still alive, Nathan." He nodded silently. "And while I am, I deserve to enjoy my own home without feeling invisible." Nathan carefully closed the folder. "I understand." Whether he truly did or not, I couldn't tell. He thanked me for the tea and quietly returned upstairs. Less than 10 minutes later, the shouting began. Claire's voice echoed throughout the duplex. Even with the windows closed, I could hear every angry word. Rent? After everything? She's trying to control us, Nathan answered more quietly, but this time he didn't simply agree with her. Their argument stretched late into the night. A glass shattered, a door slammed, then everything became still. The following morning, I walked into the hallway carrying several large moving boxes I had purchased from a local hardware store. I stacked them neatly beside the staircase leading upstairs. A few minutes later, I knocked on their apartment door. Claire answered. Her eyes were red from crying, though her expression remained defiant. "What do you want now?" she asked coldly. I stepped aside and pointed toward the boxes. "I thought these might help." She frowned. "Help with what?" "Packing." For several seconds, she simply stared at me. "You actually expect us to leave? I expect you to make whatever decision is best for your family." Her jaw tightened. "So you'd rather throw your own son out than compromise?" "My son has never been asked to leave." I kept my voice calm. "He's welcome to stay under the same conditions as any responsible adult." She crossed her arms. "And if we refuse, then you've already made your choice." Her confidence faded. The threat of moving had always been intended to pressure me into giving in. Instead, I had handed her empty boxes. For the first time, she realized I wasn't bluffing. Neither was I angry. I was simply finished sacrificing my peace to preserve someone else's comfort. Without another word, I turned and walked back downstairs. Behind me, the apartment door closed quietly. Not with anger this time, with uncertainty. And sometimes, uncertainty is the very first step toward accepting the truth. The boxes remained in the hallway for 3 days. No one touched them. The silence inside the duplex was unlike anything I had experienced in years. There were no loud gatherings upstairs, no furniture scraping across the floor, and no endless stream of visitors arriving every weekend. It was as though the entire house had paused, waiting for someone to make the next move. On the 4th morning, I looked out my living room window and saw a small moving truck backing into the driveway. I wasn't surprised. Nathan stepped out first, followed by Claire. Neither of them argued. Neither of them looked angry anymore. They simply looked exhausted. The previous weeks had taken their toll. I quietly continued watering the flowers beneath Daniel's maple tree while they carried boxes from the upstairs apartment to the truck. Hour after hour, furniture disappeared. The dining table, the sofa, their bedroom set, dozens of cardboard boxes filled with clothes, decorations, and kitchen supplies. It was strange watching the apartment empty. Once I had imagined that space would always belong to family. Now I understood that a house is only a home when respect lives inside it. By late afternoon, only a few final boxes remained. Nathan carried them downstairs alone while Claire waited inside the truck. When everything was finished, he walked toward me holding a small ring of keys. "I guess these belong to you," he said softly. I accepted them without speaking. For a long moment, neither of us knew what to say. Finally, Nathan broke the silence. "I'm sorry." This time there were no excuses, no explanations, no attempts to shift blame, just 2 simple words. "I should have spoken up years ago," he continued. "Every time Claire dismissed you, I convinced myself it wasn't worth creating conflict. I kept choosing the easy path." His voice cracked. "But the easy path wasn't fair to you." I placed a hand gently on his shoulder. "We all make mistakes." He shook his head. "You gave us everything." "I gave because I wanted to." "And we started expecting it." I smiled sadly. "That's the difference between gratitude and entitlement." Nathan lowered his eyes. "I understand that now." For the first time in years, I believed him. He wrapped his arms around me in a quiet embrace. It wasn't rushed. It wasn't forced. It felt genuine. "I'm going to miss living here," he admitted. "My door isn't closed to you," I replied. "It never was." He nodded. "I know." He walked back toward the truck. Claire remained in the passenger seat, staring straight ahead. She never rolled down the window or looked in my direction. Perhaps she still believed I'd been unfair, or perhaps admitting the truth was simply too painful. Either way, I wished her no harm. Holding on to resentment would only steal the peace I had worked so hard to reclaim. The truck slowly pulled away from the curb. Nathan lifted one hand in a quiet wave before disappearing around the corner. I stood there until the vehicle was out of sight. Then I took a deep breath. For the first time in many years, the house belonged completely to me again. The silence that followed wasn't lonely, it was comforting. Over the next several weeks, I cleaned the upstairs apartment from top to bottom. Fresh paint brightened every room. New curtains replaced the faded ones. The old hardwood floors shone after being polished. When everything was finished, I listed the apartment for rent. Within days, I met Harold and Susan, a retired couple looking for a quiet place to enjoy the next chapter of their lives. They appreciated the garden. They loved the neighborhood. Most importantly, they respected the home. After they moved in, the duplex felt alive again, but in a peaceful way. Sometimes Susan joined me for afternoon tea beneath the maple tree. Harold often helped trim the hedges or repair small things around the property without ever being asked. Kindness flowed naturally between us because it was built on mutual respect, not expectation. The extra rental income also allowed me to fulfill a dream Daniel and I had once shared. That autumn, I booked a 3-week trip through Italy. I wandered narrow streets lined with colorful buildings, enjoyed long dinners overlooking quiet rivers, and watched sunsets that painted the sky with shades of gold and crimson. For the first time in decades, every decision belonged entirely to me. One evening, while relaxing at a small cafe in Florence, my phone vibrated. It was a message from Nathan. "Mom, I hope you're doing well. I just wanted to say thank you for everything you've ever done for me. I finally understand what sacrifice really means. If you're willing, I'd love to take you to dinner when you get home. Just the two of us." I smiled as I read his words. This invitation wasn't born from guilt. It came from understanding. I replied with a single sentence. "I'd like that very much." As I slipped my phone back into my purse, I realized something important. The photograph that had once broken my heart had also given me my freedom. I hadn't won because someone else lost. I had won because I finally valued myself enough to stop accepting less than I deserved. Sometimes, the strongest act of love isn't sacrificing endlessly for others. Sometimes, it's having the courage to set a boundary, protect your peace, and remember that your kindness should never come at the cost of your dignity. That lesson changed my life forever, and it became the beginning of my happiest chapter yet.